The Whispering House. When Grace Holloway inherited the house at 103 Ash Lane, she didn't feel grateful, she felt watched. It had belonged to her Uncle Thomas, a man her family rarely spoke about. The official story was he'd gone mad in his final years, raving about things in the walls and whispers in the dark. When he died, there were no funeral guests, no obituary. Just a key and an envelope mailed to Grace with one line written in shaky handwriting, "Don't let them out." The house was a 3-story Victorian monster, rotting slowly at the edge of a dying New England town. Its windows had long since fogged with grime, and ivy clung to the wood like veins on pale skin. The neighbors avoided eye contact when she moved in. And the mailman never came past the gate. Inside, the house was cold, even in August. Grace spent the first 3 days cleaning, tossing out moldy furniture, and opening the heavy curtains that clung like damp shrouds. It was on the 4th day that she found the room. Behind the upstairs hallway, there was a narrow door she hadn't noticed before. It was bolted shut, with thick iron latches and faded red chalk symbols around the frame. Naturally, she opened it. Inside was a child's bedroom, untouched, preserved in dust. A wooden rocking horse. A mobile of tarnished stars. A small, pale bed. Everything was neat except for the wallpaper, which was torn and clawed at chest level. As if a child had scraped at it with tiny, desperate fingers. In the far corner sat a tall mirror, draped in cloth. Grace reached out. Something in her stomach twisted. She pulled the cloth off. The mirror reflected the room, but not her. Instead, it showed the back of a figure standing in the corner, facing the wall. A child. When she turned around, the room was empty. But the mirror still showed the child slowly turning toward her. She tried to leave that night. The house wouldn't let her. The key broke in the door. Her car refused to start. Her phone showed no signal. And when she ran to the edge of the property, she found herself walking back up the driveway, again and again. She slept on the couch, clutching a hammer. At 3:13 a.m., the power flickered, and the old television in the corner turned on by itself. Static. Then, a face, bloated and gray, whispered something she couldn't hear. She found a box of tapes in the basement the next morning. VHS cassettes labeled only by date. She played the first one. It showed her uncle, sitting on the floor of the mirror room, rocking back and forth. "They're awake now," he said. "The house doesn't like when the door is open. It listens. It watches. It learns." The next tape showed him sleeping. In the background, something climbed down from the ceiling. It wasn't human. Over the next few days, Grace began to notice sounds. Soft whispers beneath the floorboards. Knocking inside the walls. Breathing that didn't match her own. And always at night, the sound of something wet dragging across the wood upstairs. She boarded up the mirror room. Salted the door. But every morning, the door was open again, and the mirror was closer to the hallway, like it had slid forward in the night. Her reflection started to change. First, it lagged slightly. Then, it smiled when she didn't. Finally, it began mouthing things she couldn't hear, until one night, it simply walked away from the frame. And didn't come back. She started writing in her uncle's journal. Day 12, the house doesn't want me gone. It wants me hollow. I hear them whispering now. My name. Over and over. It's in the walls, the mirrors, even the water. Day 14, I think it's using my voice when I sleep. The neighbors say they've seen me outside. But I never leave. I never leave. Day 17, I tried to break the mirror. It bled. Grace stopped sleeping. The final straw came when she found a Polaroid photo on her pillow. It was taken from across the room, while she slept. In the photo, something stood behind her. Long limbs. A head tilted too far to the side. Smiling. There was a word written across the bottom in block letters. Holloway, she called a priest. He lasted 10 minutes in the house. He vomited, screamed, and ran, saying something about mirrors on the inside and a second house beneath this one. Grace tore up the floorboards. Beneath the living room, hidden behind brick and dirt, was a crawlspace that stretched under the house like a throat. At the far end was a mirror. Not hanging, grown into the wall, as if the house had formed around it. Her flashlight flickered. The mirror showed her, but behind her, dozens of people stood in the dark. Children. Adults. Some missing eyes. Some with mouths sewn shut. All silent. One by one, they raised their fingers to their lips. She tried to shatter the mirror with an axe. It bent the metal. Didn't crack the glass. When she screamed at it, the mirror showed her a future, herself, pale, sunken, walking through the halls whispering into every room, eyes black as tar. Not trapped. Part of it. She knew now, the house didn't haunt people. It consumed them. And the mirror was the mouth. She ran back upstairs. Every reflection, windows, glasses, faucets, showed her a different version of herself. Some bleeding. Some grinning. One pounding on the other side of the glass like she was trapped there, not here. She took the old tapes, poured gasoline in every room, and lit a match. The fire spread fast. She ran. The house burned to the ground. They found no bodies. No mirror. No trace of anything below the crawlspace. Grace moved across the country. Changed her name. Lived on the 10th floor of a building with no mirrors, no TV, no glass of any kind. Until one morning, someone slid an envelope under her door. Inside was a Polaroid photo of her sleeping. The same angle. The same figure behind her. Smiling wider. The back read, "Welcome home." She looked into the black TV screen and saw her reflection. It was smiling. She wasn't. The downstairs light. In the fall of 2016, Ava Mercer moved into a small rental house in the town of Corwin, Maine. She'd just ended a long relationship and needed a fresh start. The listing had been odd. No photos, only a street address and the words, "Must stay through fall." 3-month lease required. No early exits. But the rent was cheap, and Ava was desperate. The house was small, 1 story, painted gray with a wide front porch and a crooked chimney. At the end of a street with no other homes in sight. The landlord met her with a handshake and a warning, "The downstairs light stays on. Always. Do not turn it off." Ava blinked. "What's downstairs?" The landlord didn't answer. Just handed her the key. The house had no basement. At least, none Ava could find. She checked every room, every door, every panel in the floor. Nothing. The only light she found was a dim bulb inside a locked closet in the hallway, which gave off a faint glow through the doorframe. That night, as the wind pushed hard against the windows, she heard footsteps. Heavy ones. Moving under the floor. She froze in bed, clutching her phone, but the noise stopped. Then came the whispering. Not words. Just breath. Right next to her ear. She turned on all the lights. Slept with them on. Nothing else happened, until morning, when she found muddy footprints inside the hallway closet. Right under the lit bulb. By the 3rd week, Ava noticed something strange. Her bathroom mirror had a seam around the edge. A thin crack. She tapped it, and it moved slightly. Behind the mirror was a hole in the wall. A hole, and beyond it, stairs. Downward. Stale air wafted up from below. The smell of wet stone and something old, like rotting paper. She dropped her phone through the hole. It bounced on wood. And the flashlight revealed a narrow staircase spiraling into the dark. She should have closed it. But Ava had always been curious. The stairs led to a hidden basement, one that hadn't been listed in the rental specs, one that wasn't supposed to exist. The walls were stone, damp and marked with symbols, crude ones, carved in long scratches. Circles with slashes, eyes without pupils, and lines that twisted into themselves. There was only one light, a single dangling bulb above a small door marked, "The listening room." She turned back. Left. Locked the mirror. But that night, the closet bulb was off. And something knocked, once, twice, then a long, slow scratch, from inside the wall. Ava avoided the stairs for days. The noises got worse. Scratching. Whispers. And always, the smell of wet earth. Her closet bulb flickered at 3:13 a.m. every night. One night, she found her reflection missing in the mirror. It returned the moment she looked away. Finally, she went down again. The door to the listening room was open this time. Inside, there was only a chair and a tape recorder. On the table was a note, "Say your name. Don't stop until it answers." Ava sat. Pressed record. Ava Mercer. Ava Mercer. Ava Mercer. She repeated it for 6 minutes. Then the tape began to play on its own. Ava Mercer. Ava Mercer. Then a third voice joined in. Ava Mercer. Ava Mercer. Ava. 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 It was laughing. She ran upstairs. The closet light was off again. She began to hear footsteps matching her own. When she turned left, something behind her turned right. The lights flickered when she looked in the mirror. The faucet turned on when she blinked. And then the shadows. They didn't match her body. They were slightly too tall. Too thin. And they moved a second after she did. One night, she woke up to find her phone had recorded a video. It was from 2:47 a.m. In it, she's asleep in bed. But something steps into frame. Not walking. Just appearing, slowly. Humanoid. Gray. Faceless. It leans down to her sleeping form. And says, in her voice, "Stop turning the light off." She found it in the attic, wrapped in burlap, tied with string. A journal. Written in a jagged, frantic hand. It wasn't signed, but the last page read. "The downstairs doesn't end. It folds. The light keeps them pinned. If it goes out, they move. If they move, they remember. If they remember, they climb. And they want their names back." Ava began to dream of mirrors. Not hers, others. Cracked ones, hidden in the floors of old houses, at the bottoms of wells, behind closets. All with something behind them. Watching. The light went out 3 times that week. Once when she showered. The water turned black. Once during a phone call. The voice on the other end said, "There's someone behind you." And once, the last time, while she was eating dinner. She blinked, and the room was full of figures. Motionless. Standing in corners. Kneeling on countertops. Crawling along the ceiling. When she screamed, they turned. Every one of them had her face. She tried to flee. But the road looped. Her GPS spun in circles. The town was gone. Everywhere she turned, she was back at the house. She set fire to the walls. Salted every room. Broke every mirror. And the light still went out. So she went down one final time. The stairs had changed. Now spirals within spirals, the walls pulsing like something alive. The basement was miles deep. The tape recorder waited. She pressed play. Ava Mercer is gone. Ava Mercer was eaten. You are not Ava. She screamed until her voice cracked. A mirror cracked back. A new tenant signed the lease the next fall. The house looked empty. The only odd feature was the light in the hallway closet, always on. The landlord handed her the key and said, with a smile, one rule. Don't turn off the light downstairs. She laughed. And Ava watched her through the mirror. Smiling. The Widow and the Well. In October of 1988, the town of Wrentham, Massachusetts, welcomed a newcomer. Evelyn Moore, a quiet woman in her late 40s, moved into the old Bellamy house that had sat empty for decades. Rumors swirled around it like the autumn leaves, that it was cursed, that people went mad inside, that something lived in the well. The townspeople said Evelyn was a widow, though no one had seen her husband, and she didn't speak of him. She drove an old blue Buick, shopped at the corner store once a week, and walked her dog, a large, silent German shepherd named Byron, along the edges of the forest every dusk. The Bellamy house was a crumbling Victorian estate on 5 acres of woods and stone walls. At its center stood the well, older than the house, made of weathered granite blocks, capped in rusted iron, sealed tight with a heavy padlock. No one knew who had sealed it. But they knew why. On her first night, Evelyn lit candles in every room. The electricity hadn't worked in years, and the generator out back groaned whenever it kicked in. Rain tapped on the windows. The floorboards creaked with the weight of the wind. And then she heard it. From the direction of the well. A low, distant knocking. Like knuckles on wood. Rhythmic. Measured. She stared out the window for a long time. And then turned away. Byron growled. The next morning, Evelyn inspected the well. The padlock was intact. The chains were unbroken. But the moss around the stones had been scraped away, recently. Fresh gouges in the granite. Something had clawed at it. That night, she dreamed of her husband. He stood at the foot of her bed, drenched in water, eyes black as pitch, mouth open but silent. When she woke, there were puddles on the floor. She found it in the attic, a leather-bound book, brittle with age, filled with looping handwriting. It belonged to Abigail Bellamy, the original owner of the house. The entries were scattered, hysterical. The boy came back wrong. He was dead. We buried him. But the well gave him back, and now he watches me from corners. The water doesn't quench thirst. It remembers. It speaks at night. I see faces in the mirrors, calling me to look deeper. He lives below now. He feeds on names. We cannot say his. We cannot think it. Evelyn stopped reading. The next week, Byron refused to go near the well. He whined, scratched at the doors, and stared at the woods with his hackles raised. Evelyn began hearing whispers. At first faint. Barely audible through the floor. Then clearer. Evelyn. Evelyn, you know me. The voice was familiar. It was her husband's. It rained for 3 days straight. The power failed. Her candles burned low. The basement flooded, but not with rain. The water was black, thick, and cold. It smelled of rot and something older. The whispers grew louder. Byron began barking at empty rooms. And Evelyn began to remember things she hadn't lived. Children drowning. A man screaming from the bottom of a pit. Nails scratching against stone, and the sound of someone crying beneath the well. On the 7th night, the padlock on the well was broken. Lying on the ground, rusted through. The chains coiled beside it like shed skin. The well cap was open. Evelyn didn't remember unlocking it. But her hands were wet. Her feet muddy. Her dreams full of stairs spiraling down and voices singing in reverse. Byron was gone. She waited until midnight. Tied a rope to the nearest tree. Lowered herself into the well. The walls were slick with slime. Symbols carved deep into the stone. As she descended, the air grew colder, then warmer, then sharp with the stench of decay. 10 feet down. 20. 30. Then the rope jerked. Something below had pulled it. She hit the bottom. A chamber opened in the darkness. Lit by a faint blue glow, like moonlight filtered through water. The ground pulsed beneath her feet. In the center of the room stood a figure. Human-shaped. Too tall. Arms too long. No face. But its voice, "You brought me back. You said my name. Evelyn, you remembered." She backed away. "Who are you?" "You knew me as Thomas. I drowned. You mourned. But your grief called me. The house hears grief. The well drinks it. And now I am all that is left." She screamed. The walls echoed it forever. Water gushed from the cracks. Black. Choking. Alive. She climbed, gasping, hands slipping on wet stone. Something clawed at her feet. A voice screamed her name with too many mouths. Faces bloomed in the water. She reached the top. Crawled out into the night. The well sealed itself behind her. Weeks passed. Byron never returned. The whispers stopped. But the mirrors in the house no longer reflected her face. She boarded the well shut. Planted flowers over it. Sold the house. Left Rentham without looking back. She sleeps in hotels now. Changes cities every week. But every mirror still shows the same thing, a tall figure, standing just behind her. Smiling. The house that waits. In early spring of 1993, Eleanor Vance bought the Marsden house at a county auction for $11,000. It was a steal. A 19th-century mansion buried deep in the Appalachian woods outside Ash Hollow, Tennessee. 3 stories. 5 bedrooms. 2 balconies. A library with stained glass windows and a third-floor observatory. But it came with a reputation. The locals called it cursed. Eleanor didn't believe in curses. She was a history professor on sabbatical. Widowed for 6 years. Tired of people's pity and the noise of the city. She wanted silence. Isolation. A house that could become a project. And this house waited. The first night, Eleanor slept on a cot in the study. Rain fell steadily. The power had yet to be restored. Her flashlight flickered constantly. Around 2 a.m., she heard footsteps above her. Heavy. Slow. Measured. But there was no one else in the house. She climbed the creaking stairs, heart pounding. The 3rd floor was cold. Breath visible cold. She opened the observatory door. Nothing inside. Except the telescope, already pointed at her window. And the faint smell of sulfur. The house had doors that wouldn't open. One at the end of each hallway. Eleanor tried every key the auctioneers had given her. None fit. The library door was one of them. She could peek through the keyhole. Inside, rows of untouched books, covered in dust. And something else. A figure. Barely visible. A tall man in a coat, back turned, unmoving. When she pulled away and looked again, the room was empty. Behind a loose panel in the drawing room, Eleanor found a hidden spiral staircase leading downward. The basement wasn't on any blueprint. It was wide, echoing. At its center, a dry fountain shaped like a weeping woman. Her face was turned upward, her mouth stretched wide in an eternal scream. Words were etched around the fountain's rim in Latin, "Ca dormit hic, non somniat solus." He who sleeps here does not dream alone. That night, Eleanor dreamed of water in her lungs. And hands on her feet, trying to pull her down. Inside a false wall in the master bedroom, Eleanor discovered a stack of letters. They were all addressed to one woman, Beatrice Marsden, 1875 to 1882. They were love letters. Some romantic. Others frantic. Then increasingly unhinged. Beatrice, the house knows. It turns its face when I speak your name. I see it breathing behind the walls. I hear it weeping through the floors. You must leave. He walks again. Every night, I hear the cane on the stairs. I thought he was dead. But the house never lets go. It keeps what it loves. The last letter was signed, E.M. Eleanor's initials. The plumber came on a Thursday. He lasted 20 minutes. He emerged from the basement trembling. Something's wrong with the piping. It sounds like voices. Not water. Not air. Voices. Like someone's whispering behind the walls. I can't fix that. I'm sorry. He never came back. That night, Eleanor turned on the bathroom faucet. Water trickled out, deep red. And from the drain came the faint sound of breathing. She opened the north bedroom. Inside, an inch of dust coated everything. Except the floor. Clear footprints walked in circles around the bed. Over and over. Deep. Precise. Leading nowhere. Eleanor followed them until they stopped at the wall. Pressed her ear against it. Heard something say. Don't sleep in here. He walks at night. She slept on the floor of the kitchen. Desperate for answers, Eleanor visited the county records office. The archivist pulled old news clippings. 1902, 5 members of the Marsden family found dead. No wounds. No signs of struggle. Eyes missing. 1924, house purchased by novelist Amos Bell. Vanished 1 month later. 1951, police called to investigate screams. Found house empty, all furniture gone. Walls covered in charcoal handprints. 1977. House auctioned after owner found wandering highway, blind and mute. The archivist leaned in. We used to think the house was haunted. Now we think it's hungry. The observatory window faced the forest. But one night, Eleanor looked out and saw herself. Standing in the woods. Watching the house. The next day, she found boot prints outside her window. She began hearing piano music late at night. Soft, slow. A lullaby. The house had no piano. She followed the sound to the drawing room. Empty. But a music box sat on the mantel. One she'd never seen before. She opened it. Inside, a single tooth. Human. And a note, he sleeps in pieces. After weeks, one of the locked doors opened on its own. Inside, the library. All the books had been arranged in a spiral. Floor to ceiling. In the center was a chair facing away. Eleanor approached. The chair was empty. But the books whispered. She never left. She just forgot. You are Beatrice. He waits for your name. The house began calling her by a different name. Letters appeared addressed to Beatrice. Photographs appeared on the mantel, Victorian, stained, always showing a woman with her face scratched out. And a man with dark eyes and a cane. Do you remember me, darling? She heard it in the pipes. You promised to stay. She heard it in the walls. The house remembers love. She began writing letters she didn't recall starting. Always signed, Beatrice. Always dated 1882. In the basement, behind the fountain, a hidden door appeared. It led to a hallway lined with mirrors. Each one showed Eleanor. But older. Grayer. More tired. One version mouthed something. "Help me." Another grinned. A third was covered in blood. The hallway ended in a room of glass. Inside, a wedding dress. Floating in air. Still wet. She tried to leave. Every path led back to the house. Her phone stopped working. Maps glitched. Her tires went flat. When she called the sheriff, he said, "That place? Been empty for years. Ain't no Eleanor there." She screamed. Begged. He hung up. The house laughed. The observatory was filled with candles. She hadn't lit them. A table set for two. A cake. A dress on the bed. The house whispered, "He comes tonight." And he did. Tall. Silent. Cane tapping the floor. His face changed every time she blinked. He knelt. "Do you take this house, in sickness and in silence, in nightmare and in name?" She said nothing. The house said yes for her. She lives there still. Or something that looks like her does. Tourists say the Marsden house is just a ruin. But sometimes, at night, you can see a woman in white on the balcony. Staring at the road. Waiting. The voices in Willow Creek. In November of 2002, something strange happened in the town of Willow Creek, Wyoming. The local radio station, KWCR 87.5 FM, began airing something new. Not music. Not weather. Not news. Whispers. At first, the static came only after midnight, hushed murmurs layered under faint white noise. People thought it was a glitch, an old tape spooling wrong. But then the whispers began to say names. First names. Last names. And dates. One night, a woman heard her brother's name. He died the next day. Mara Bell was 19. A waitress. Lived in a trailer with her younger sister, Kelly, just outside town limits. She didn't believe in curses or ghost stories. But she listened to KWCR every night to help her sleep. Until the night she heard her own name. Mara Bell. November 22nd. That was 4 days away. Mara stormed into the station the next day. It was run by an old man named Gerald Black, half-blind and nearly deaf, who said the station had no late-night programming. "We go dead air after 10 p.m. Our signal barely reaches the valley. You must be picking up something else." But when Mara checked the soundboard logs, she saw something odd. An audio file had recorded itself the night before. No one had pressed record. No one was in the station. The file was labeled, "It knows you." Wave. Willow Creek wasn't just a town. It was also a place. A thin, winding stream that cut through the northern woods. Kids dared each other to follow it. Locals said it was haunted. Mara and Kelly went there one morning, searching for clues. They found something under a dead tree, a rusted radio transmitter. Wired into the roots. Still warm. Still humming. That night, Mara tuned in again. This time, she recorded what she heard. A voice whispered, "You are already inside." Then the sound of static reversed. Screams in reverse. Clocks ticking. Glass shattering. And laughter. She played the recording backward. "You will not leave." Kelly began seeing numbers carved into wood. On their porch. Inside the diner. On the back of a dollar bill. Each time, a new set, 22. 11, 5. The last number changed daily. It was a countdown. At the library, Mara found a news clipping. Local girl vanishes in Willow Creek Forest. No trace found. November 22, 1968. Her name was also Mara. Her face was nearly identical. The article noted she loved the radio. And she disappeared on the same day Mara had heard predicted. That night, KWCR went dead at 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes early. But Mara still heard it. The static. The whisper. The voice, "Come back to the creek. Come back and finish it." She covered her ears. The sound leaked through. Kelly screamed. Blood dripped from her nose. The radio burst into flame. They returned to the forest the next morning. The transmitter was gone. But buried beneath the tree was a cassette tape. Wrapped in plastic. No label. They played it on an old stereo in town. It played Breathing. Then, You Were Always Here. Let Her Go. One Must Stay. Kelly's voice. Mara began sleepwalking. She woke up outside. Barefoot. Covered in dirt. A signal tower drawn in charcoal on her arms. She found notebooks she didn't remember writing. Filled with symbols. Diagrams. Frequencies. One entry, "I am not alone in my skin. The voices want air." Gerald Black vanished. The station kept broadcasting. No one was inside. The door locked from the outside. Every speaker in town, car radios, TVs, phones, began syncing to 87.5 FM at midnight. You couldn't turn it off. It always started with a dial tone. Then a name. Then the date. Mara remembered a line from the woods, "One must stay." It didn't mean death. It meant signal. Consciousness. She made a choice. Dragged a speaker to the creek. Carved a symbol into the dirt. Spoke into the static, "Take me. Let her go." The creek stilled. And whispered, "Accepted." Kelly woke up in bed. Her ears no longer bled. The countdown was gone. The symbols faded. Mara was missing. But KWCR played music again. Old songs. Jazz. Weather reports. Except sometimes, just before dawn, a voice slips through. "Kelly, don't come back." Then silence. Beneath Silent Ridge in 1997, a geology research team from Colorado State University began excavating a remote valley near Silent Ridge, Utah. The area was geologically rich but largely untouched, fenced off decades prior by the government. Rumors in nearby towns claimed it had once been home to an ancient burial site. Native American, possibly older. Dr. Helen Ward, lead geologist and team coordinator, had one goal: map the subterranean limestone caves. On the third day, they broke into a cavern not listed on any records. And everything changed. The cavern was vast, hundreds of feet wide, a cathedral of stone. But at its center stood something unnatural, a smooth black monolith, 20 feet tall, with no seams, no markings, and no explanation. It didn't reflect light. It absorbed it. Cameras failed near it. The closer you stood, the more you heard things. Not voices exactly. Not sound. Thoughts that weren't yours. Helen touched it. And dreamed of fire. After that night, Helen changed. She stopped sleeping. Her eyes darkened. She began drawing symbols she didn't recognize, spidery things, looping and angular, etched into her notebooks, carved into her tent poles. Other team members started hearing noises. Whispers in the windless caves. A ticking sound that came from the rock, even though it had no moving parts. Then came the first disappearance. Luis Vega, their youngest field assistant, vanished during a solo scouting walk. Search teams found his flashlight near the main shaft, blinking erratically. Then they found a shoe. Then bones. Except the bones were ancient. And not entirely human. A skull, twice the size of a normal man's. 4 eye sockets. No one spoke about it out loud. But the team was no longer alone. At night, the black stone echoed. If you stood near it, you heard your name. Then you heard it again. Far away. In a voice just like yours. Helen began writing in a language no one could read. Dr. Kessler, her second in command, tried to intervene. He recorded one of her rants, a feverish monologue spoken in an inhuman cadence. He played it backward. And heard her say, "They are waking beneath." The government arrived 5 days later. Hazmat suits. Drones. Black SUVs. They sealed off the valley. Declared a quarantine. No reason given. Helen and her team were told to stay in their camp. No radio communication allowed. The cave entrance was welded shut. But the stone still sang. Everyone began to dream the same dream. Falling. Into a pit lined with teeth. Endless whispers in a language of clicks and breaths. And one phrase repeated, again and again, "Your gods are asleep. Ours are not." 2 team members went mad. One gouged out his ears with a pencil. The other walked into the desert naked. Inside an abandoned ranger station nearby, the team found blueprints. Old government maps. Layers beneath Silent Ridge. Tunnels, chambers. One was labeled simply, containment. Another, CHNT. They never learned what it meant. But it was circled. Repeated. Underlined in red. One night, Helen disappeared. They followed her trail back to the cave. It had opened again. The stone split down the center, glowing faintly from within. The heat was unbearable. Yet Helen had gone inside. So did they. Beneath the monolith was a spiral stairway of stone. It descended for miles. Every 100 steps, they passed doors. Each sealed with symbols. Each whispering something new. One door bled. One door wept. One breathed. They opened none. Until the final door. It stood ajar. Inside was Helen. Floating. Her skin covered in eyes. Helen spoke, but not with her mouth. "We were never alone. They buried the old gods here. But burial is not death." The cave shook. Stone fell. A voice deeper than thunder rumbled through the stairs. "You have been heard. Only 2 survived. Dr. Kessler and a grad student named Mina. They crawled from the shaft as the valley collapsed behind them. The mountain swallowed itself. No sign of the monolith. No trace of Helen. But the government sealed the area with concrete. Called it a landslide. Kessler never spoke again. Mina kept drawing in her sleep. CHNT appeared everywhere. On her skin. Her walls. The inside of her eyelids. She checked herself into a psychiatric hospital. 1 year later, a nurse found her room empty. On her bed, written in blood, beneath still calls. "We are its echo." The lights on Garfield Road. It started on a Thursday night in October. Just after 1 a.m. A blinding blue light lit up the sky over Garfield Road in the small town of Delman, Ohio. People thought it was lightning. But there were no clouds. No thunder. Just that single, sharp flash. And then the power went out. All over town. 2 hours later, Jason and Claire Melrose, newlyweds who lived off Garfield Road, were reported missing. Their car was found still running, driver's side door open, hazard lights blinking. Inside were two things: Claire's wedding ring, Jason's phone, screen cracked, stuck on a 7-second video. The video showed trees swaying violently. A hum, loud and unnatural. Then Jason whispering, "They're not lights. They look like us." Sheriff Ira Boone had been in law enforcement 34 years. Nothing rattled him. Until he reviewed the town's traffic cam footage. At 1:03 a.m., one camera caught a still image, for identical figures walking in perfect sync across Garfield Road. Same height. Same clothes. Same faces. The face of Jason Melrose. Every radio station in Delman began broadcasting static. But embedded deep in the noise was a pattern, Morse code. Decoded, it read, "Don't let them touch you." Teenagers thought it was a prank. Until one of them, Alice Monroe, went missing after following the lights into the cornfield. Her friend said she stared up at the sky and whispered, "I remember this. But I never lived it." 3 days after they vanished, Claire came back. Naked. Silent. Standing on her own front porch. But it wasn't her. She didn't blink. Didn't flinch. Her pupils were completely white. She just stood, head tilted. When her sister touched her arm, Claire spoke. This version didn't scream. And then she laughed, a sound like two voices at once. All the strange activity seemed to circle around House 112 on Garfield Road, a property abandoned since 1986. Records said it had been a foster home. The last known occupant was a child named Owen Vale. Except Owen never existed in census data. The house had no electrical wiring. But it buzzed at night. Sheriff Boone investigated House 112 alone. He found a bathroom with a perfectly clean mirror. But when he looked into it, his reflection didn't move. Instead, it smiled. "I like wearing your shape." Boone shot the mirror. The glass didn't break. But the reflection screamed. And Boone walked out of the house, followed closely by another Boone. Kelly Raines, a local teacher, started connecting events. She discovered the lights reappear every 27 years, always in the same area. Always followed by disappearances. She found old newspaper clippings from 1921, 1948, and 1975. Different people. Same descriptions: glowing sky, lost time, mirrors that breathe. The lights were a cycle. A return. KWDL radio station tried to fight back. They aired a live feed, warning residents to evacuate. The signal cut out mid-broadcast. All televisions in Delman flickered to life. Even those unplugged. On screen, the faces of everyone who had gone missing. Each one smiled. Then, in perfect unison, they spoke, "We are almost done choosing." Sheriff Boone disappeared on Halloween. No one saw him go. But the next night, someone who looked like him stood in the station. He gave a full report. Knew every detail. But when asked who the mayor was, he blinked. Then said, "I haven't learned that one yet." The lights returned to the sky above Garfield Road. And this time, they didn't leave. The Forgotten Cells. In 2024, the state of Maryland quietly reopened the long-abandoned Grey Ditch Penitentiary for investigation. Closed since 1972 after a violent riot that left 38 inmates and 7 guards dead, it had sat sealed and untouched for over 50 years. A team of researchers and state officials entered the facility. They didn't all come out. The prison was decayed but strangely preserved. No signs of looting or graffiti. As if it had been waiting. In cell block D, they found a door that hadn't appeared on any blueprint. A rusted red steel door with 7 bolts. The paint was fresh. It was cold to the touch. Old files in the warden's office revealed something troubling. Cell Block D had been sealed before the riot. Not afterward. Its last listed inmate? A man named Elam Firth. Crime, none listed. Sentence, indefinite containment. Notes, do not interact. Do not speak. Do not listen. A researcher named Nolan brought recording equipment into D Block. He picked up a sound. Faint tapping. A rhythmic knock, repeating every 11 seconds. When slowed down, it wasn't random. It was Morse code. Still here. The walls of the cells were covered in charcoal drawings. Eyes. Thousands of them. Some weeping, some bleeding. Some open mouths filled with hands. At the center of the corridor, a mural of the prison itself. But painted upside down. Every member of the team reported insomnia. They all began to dream of the same thing, being buried alive in a concrete box, listening to whispering voices through the walls. One man tried to claw his way through the cinder block with his fingernails. He kept muttering, "He's walking again." Hidden in a secret floor panel, they found cassette tapes labeled *E, Firth, observation. On the recordings, Elam never spoke. He stared into the corner of his cell, unmoving. For days. Until one tape. He looked into the camera and said, "When I blink, something else opens its eyes." Nolan disappeared on the 12th day. His gear was found in the hallway outside the red door. His camera was on. The last frame showed Nolan staring at the door. And something behind him. Something wearing his face. New plans surfaced. Greyditch had 3 sublevels, not 2. Sublevel 3 was sealed with cement in 1949. No record explained why. But its name appeared in the files. The Echo Level. One researcher returned from exploring sublevel 2. He wouldn't stop screaming. Doctors sedated him, but when he woke up, he wrote, "I saw their mouths moving. The walls were speaking." Then his skin began to peel. From the inside out. Security footage showed 2 versions of lead investigator Dana Hill. One in the mess hall. One entering the red door. They never crossed paths. But each smiled the exact same way. In an old ledger, Elam Firth's death was listed. January 13, 1943. But his intake date was 1951. He had died 8 years before he arrived. One corridor whispered constantly. When amplified, the whispers said, "Trade a name. Earn a face. Trade a face. Earn a life." Team members started speaking in their sleep. Not in English. 2 researchers tried to flee. They were stopped. Not by security. By others who looked like them. Perfectly. But their eyes were entirely black. The prison lights began to fail, one by one. Darkness moved in the halls like smoke. It swallowed anything left alone too long. And it whispered as it passed, "You are not the first. You won't be the last." They broke through to sublevel 3. It wasn't a prison. It was a cathedral. Pews made of bone. Walls of unblinking eyes. And in the center, a stone coffin wrapped in chains. The tag read, "Elam Firth. Subject 13. Do not open." From the coffin, a low hum began. A vibration in the air, like a song made of insects. One by one, the team began humming back. They didn't know why. They didn't stop. Inside a broken flashlight, they found a key. It was made of bone. Dana Hill used it. The coffin opened. And Elam Firth was not inside. Just his teeth. Arranged into a perfect, grinning circle. The prison was evacuated. Files destroyed. Doors sealed. Official story, asbestos contamination. But the power still flickers in town. People go missing. Sometimes, you hear tapping in the pipes. 11 seconds apart. Dana Hill went missing 3 months later. Her replacement received a package. Inside, a mirror, smeared in ash. And one note: when he died, he split into the ones who remember and the ones who become. Now he is both. Hollow chimes. The town of Fenlake had one rule: never go near the old church after sundown. Especially not the bell tower. The chimes had long rusted silent, yet every year on October 31st, they rang. No one ever saw who rang them. After 15 years away, Evelyn Marsh returned to Fenlake to settle her late grandmother's estate. The town hadn't changed much. But the old church had. Its tower seemed taller. Wrong, somehow. It loomed over every street. And Evelyn heard the chimes. In her dreams. Among her grandmother's things, Evelyn found a leather-bound journal. It belonged to Father Griggs, the last pastor of the church. It ended abruptly in 1973. Final entry: the bell does not summon God. It invites something older. A local teen, Julian Brooke, vanished after daring friends he'd climb the bell tower on a dare. He never came down. His phone was found by the steps. Recording audio. Faintly in the background: "Let me wear your skin." The church windows had changed. The stained glass now showed scenes of hollow figures pulling bells from mouths, of children with no eyes, and of a tower wrapped in veins. They hadn't looked that way last week. Or ever. Evelyn woke up standing at the church gate. Barefoot. Her hands bloody. She had carved something into the stone with her nails. I rang it. The local historian told Evelyn the tower predates the church by 300 years. Older records claim it was part of an asylum. Older still? A pagan site. People were buried in the walls. To quiet the chimes. Children played a game in Fenlake: stand by the church at midnight and whisper your name into the wind. The legend says you'll hear your name whispered back, followed by a second name. The name of the one who must die. Evelyn saw herself outside her window. Same face. Different eyes. Hollow. Glassy. It grinned and vanished when the chimes rang. Her neighbor said he saw Evelyn walking the church grounds that night. But she was in bed. Father Griggs was never buried. Evelyn found an old VHS tape marked "Keeper." It showed grainy footage of a man shackled in the tower, skin stretched thin, eyes wide, mouthing, "I can still hear them." The bell tower wasn't empty. Inside was a rope soaked in something thick. Every time Evelyn touched it, she saw glimpses: people walking into the tower. None walking out. A phrase echoed: "The toll must be paid." People in Fenlake began changing. Repeating conversations. Standing still for hours. Bleeding from the ears when the wind shifted. One by one, they rang tiny bells tied to their doors. Every ring sounded like Evelyn's voice. On Halloween, Evelyn climbed the tower. Each step groaned like a scream. On the top floor, she found a mirror, and in it, her reflection split open into dozens of Evelyns, all whispering, "One must stay. One must ring. One must become." To end the curse, Evelyn had to choose: ring the bell herself, or break the rope and let whatever waited in the chimes escape. She broke it. The town fell silent. No wind. No sound. Then the screaming began. Fenlake is a quiet town again. Visitors say it feels strange. Like being watched. A new bell was hung in the tower. It rings once a day. At dawn. And if you listen closely, it sounds just like someone whispering Evelyn's name.